And then I'll introduce the entirety. You don't stand there. You stand wherever you're most comfortable.
Yep, I'm getting it right now. 1 second. Just want to make sure it's the center. If you go to on YouTube, if you search Mount Marty University, it'll be easier that way. Bingo, of course.
I just didn't hear you. I'm going to be your father. Everybody got the link, ladies? Yes. All Well, thank you very much for coming out to the senior seminar presentations for Research Day here at Mount Marty. I can't thank you enough for being part of the audience. Feel free to grab a seat there. And what we're going to do today is we have about 10 seniors here at Mount Marty in the Criminal Justice Department who will be presenting their research for the semester. The prompt, I will give you guys a heads up on what the prompt is because each topic is individually, has an individual subject, but the overarching topic is they were instructed to find a problem in the criminal justice world and how you're going to solve it. A very vague but open topic to give them lots and lots of opportunities for research. So I can't be more proud. I've seen some snippets here and there of their presentations, and from what I've seen, I couldn't be more proud. These guys are absolutely shining stars here at Mount Marty. And with that, the first of our presentations will be Mr. Josh Livermore.
Well, this is my presentation over police retention and police recruitment. Obviously, my name is Josh Livermore. For my introduction, I wanted to talk about the aftermath of George Floyd. When George Floyd was murdered in 2020, we saw the loss of over 35,000 to 30,000 full-time officers in the United States of America. Due to that is obviously COVID and George Floyd, and basically because police officers were treated more harshly, and rightfully so to an extent. But that trend cannot continue on. Obviously, we saw within 4 to 8, probably 8 years, we saw probably over 60,000 officers that have left the force due to police going viral for not a good reason. This picture here I wanted to show you because this dotted line shows the minimum of what we can allow as a country for full-time officers. As you can see, we are very low. Got a lot of room to make up with our current level and our rising population. Obviously the top is the maximum, but we're not even hitting the minimum yet for the staff. Once we start hitting that, we could possibly see a decrease in crime overall. My problem statement, our police agencies have suffered low retention and low recruitment percentages within probably the past 10 to 20 years. Alright, situation itself. I went to school to become a police officer, more specifically to be a deputy sheriff for Minnehaha County, which is Sioux Falls County. This sits with me because I don't want to be mandated 16 to 18 hour shifts while I'm working for Minnehaha. I have seen that on a personal level working for DOC. I've had the privilege of working for South Dakota State Penitentiary, where I've seen my own coworkers having to work 18+ hour shifts because they were mandated. I do not want that. I want my department to be the best. Playing football at Mount Marty, I wanted my team to be the best. I was always in the weight room. I was always watching film, trying to be the best. And I want that in my future career. I want guys that can stick with the career and make it better. I don't want to not have a life because I'm working those types of hours at for Minnehaha County. The numbers. This specifically, 2011, we had almost 700,000 officers full-time. In 2012, we dropped down to just above 670,000. Like I already said, that trend is unsustainable. We cannot have that trend as a country, especially our rising population index. The more people we get, the more officers we can have as a whole. I believe, if I'm correct, we can have around 900,000 to 1 million full-time officers in the United States of America. And obviously we are very, very low to that number. And again, I wanted to, because George Floyd was the recent one, over 30,000 officers, we need to stop police officers going viral for bad things. We need more training. We need more opportunity to become better. My literature review. Police money for Bernard 2022 shows that how bonuses and incentives could make police officers pretty much act better. They do their day-to-day jobs better overall when they are being paid what they can sustain, what they can live on. And they also have something to work towards. Once you have something to work towards, you're going to work hard at it. You're not going to make those mistakes. You're going to be better overall. And for stress management, Sober 2020 shows us how if you're stressed as a cop, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to pull that trigger a little more often than you should. You're going to become a little more aggressive than you probably should. So that study showed us if departments offer stress management classes, the more likely those officers are going to be less stressed and more relaxed on the job. For police recruitment, Lyons and Wright 2019 showed us how the recruitment process for police officers sways young people away. It showed us how incorporating different processes into the academy instead of doing it before the academy. Because I know if right out of college I don't have a job and I'm waiting 6 to 8 months before I have a job, that's not really good for me. I want to have a job right away. I want to be able to have that application process done and already in the academy doing what I want to do. Here's a little history for full-time officers. Obviously in 2011, 698,000. Dropped down quickly to 670,000. Dropped down even again in 2016 with 652,000. Then about 2016 to 2020, we were doing pretty well with almost 700,000 full-time officers. Then obviously we dropped down quick to 660,000. As of 2024, I believe we are sitting at almost 700,000 again. So we're basically making up the difference that we should already have to begin with. And then again, officers went viral for the wrong thing. Discussion. Once we start getting police officers on the streets, once we get them into patrol cars, we see a deterrence factor. We see crime going down really fast because we have more officers on the streets. The more officers we have, the less likely those specific roads and houses are going to be affected because they see police officers patrolling them. They're not going to take that chance in case there's a patrol officer already there. For police retention, again, less stress, but more education. The more educated an officer is, the less likely they're going to pull that trigger again. When you're educated as an officer, you tend to be more fulfilled on what the street actually is, what you're actually doing on patrol. You also have that basic knowledge of the law before you even go to the academy and become a police officer. Here are my potential solutions to fix this problem. My first one would be physical involvement in military campuses and bases. I believe creating that relationship with recruiters and aspiring officers could bring in more people overall. Higher pay and bonuses. Like I said, once you're being paid what you can live on, more people are going to come to the job. They're going to want to come to the job. For my third one, more training offered to release stress. That's just not just stress training, but mental health training and physical training, more classes offered, more areas to work on. We could see people coming in to want to do that job. And the impact of doing nothing. I believe if we do nothing, it'll get worse. It'll continue to decrease and increase due to those influxes of those videos online. So I believe doing nothing is completely out the window. For that, I wanted to go back to physical involvement in college campuses because that's my favorite one. That's my number one choice. The more physical involvement you have with somebody, like, you know, if you're texting, if you're calling, if you're getting to know that person, the bigger the relationship's gonna be. On another personal standpoint, obviously I was recruited to play football here at Mount Marty. I created a relationship with those coaches. I created a almost like father figure for them, a father figure for me. So that basically made me want to come here because I had that relationship. So if you create a relationship with those recruiters, you're more likely going to come to that specific place. Here's my recommendations for further research. This is basically what research I would want to see more so than I did see during my research of the whole topic. Education. How important is education for police officers? Entry-level patrol officers, how important is it? And contact, what actual contact do recruiters have? I know on a personal level, I haven't seen much recruitment from different police agencies here at Mount Marty. I was kind of down about that, but overall, I would just like to see it more. For mental health, more mental health in policing. I know some agencies have on-site counselors, but if you could find a way for every agency to have that, it'd be better overall. And funding, where the actual funding is going. Is it going to, all of it going to the police, or is it going to different places for which it was supposed to go to the police? And for my conclusions, I wanted to say, we need police officers. Police officers are what we do as a country. They protect us, they serve us. We need them. Going viral for those specific reasons, it's never good for police officers. So we need to get good people in, we need to keep people in, we need to retain those officers, and we need to recruit those new time officers. The more time we focus on those good people, the more people we're gonna get in. Just basically overall, we need to continue recruiting, we need to continue to retain those good people and offer those bonuses and those higher bonuses to get those people to stay. And for recruitment again, having those people that come in and talk would be better to serve us as a whole, because we could continue to build those relationships that get people to be more comfortable with us. And those are my references. Thank you.
Did you click through to the end?
Oh, no.
I got it.
Okay.
Should be innovative. I didn't know either. All the time, it's true.
Hi, my name is Jay Cosborn, and I am doing mine over the death penalty and the inhumaneness of it. The problem with the death penalty is that it is inhumane. We have all heard about botched executions, things that go wrong. There needs to be better solutions to handle this. Reasons for these solutions is so that we can find a way to make sure that no one is being severely mistreated during the death penalty. Everyone deserves the right and the fairness of it. Also, to stop botched executions. That is one of the major things that can go wrong with the death penalty, is the fact that there have been numerous botched executions that have either led to the person aspirating to death, or just not a very pleasant way of seeing someone having a lethal injection needle put in them over and over again. Why this is important to me is because I have had family in law enforcement who have witnessed this. They have witnessed someone being sentenced and put to death. My dad, he's a former prisoner. He knew people that were on death row. And let's just say that was the last time they ever spoke with him before their execution. Also, I came here to Mount Marty to become a lawyer. I want to be an advocate to help find better solutions for the death penalty, to make sure that everyone is being treated fairly, as is their constitutional right. Again, going with this, I also want to work as an advocate as I become a lawyer. Give those that, yes, even though they are criminals, they still deserve a voice to be heard. One of my solutions is having a team that knows what they are doing. For death penalties, lethal injection is the most number one way we are now going. Have doctors and nurses that know what they are doing. Having a medical team that knows what they are doing will help with the effectiveness of the death penalty. It won't seem like it's being barbaric or being treated like a human being, an animal led to slaughter. Also making sure that the most common, I will say this, the most common way that lethal injections have been botched is that the needle has been misplaced. It has either missed the vein, and it causes excruciating pain because they will then have to redo it over again. Another reason, from Sarek A. and Denny M. and Gabler Mishler and Marzik R. and Pelosi L., the drugs have to be administered in the right dosage. There is a certain amount of the chemical cocktail, which considers of a paralytic to help numb, and then the potassium chloride, which is the final medication that is used for the death penalty. Also, use the chemical compounds that are not expired. Again, referring back to Gabler and Sarek and Pelosi, all of them, they have found out that during a study, around 8 executions were using the same chemical compound, but that had been expired. This chemical compound has a shelf life. That is another reason that these executions are being botched, and we need a team that knows, hey, let's not use. Also, the warden chooses the executioner. Having someone in the prison system having someone in the prison system that knows what they are doing. Solution 2, abolish the death penalty. Get rid of it completely. Put the person in life for prison. Just have them spend their rest of their lives. According to Barry M. KM, about 37% of the public does not support the death penalty. Amendment right. Again, referring back to Barry K.M. Abolitionists see the death penalty as barbaric. They see it as mistreatment of a human being. They do not see it as a justice. Abolitionists, again referring back to the barbaricness, see it as you're leading a human to be an animal to slaughter. No matter what the crime, they should still be treated as a human. This one, I will warn you, solution 3 is a dark and morbid solution. Cyanide pill. Having a backup plan. Because there could be a million things that go wrong with the executions. Having this will help make it quick and efficient. It also is effective for thorough justice because it takes up to a couple of minutes. According to John Hopkins, it takes about 100 to 200 milligrams to kill a person. So having this as a backup plan helps just as a precautionary if something were to go awry. Do nothing. This is one of the other solutions is do nothing. Nothing changes. You will still have people against the death penalty. You will still have botched executions. You will still have everything going wrong. No solutions will be found. It'll just remain the same as it is in today's society. A better solution that I think would be having the team that knows what they are doing. You are least likely to have any botched executions if you have the team that has the knowledge of what they are doing. Also, treat the person with more humane and dignity. Even though, yes, they are a criminal, they have been accused probably of something really heinous to deserve the death penalty. But this treats them like a human, not an animal. And it also gives respect to the person, even if they are a criminal in the criminal justice system. And those are my references.
Can you just close yours out?
I'm Carly Herbold, and I'm going to be discussing inadequate legal representation in America. So first, I want to go over my situation itself and why this matters to me. So after Mount Marty, I do plan on going to law school to become a lawyer. And as a lawyer, I have a responsibility to my clients to provide that good representation to make sure I'm doing a good job so that they can get the justice they deserve. And as a lawyer, I hope that I'm held accountable to do the right thing, make sure I am providing that representation. And if I'm not, to make sure somebody holds me accountable so that they are able to get the justice they deserve. Then assurance, if I ever need help in the future, I want to know that I will be provided that good quality legal aid that I need. And then altogether, just basic rights, not only of me, but of everyone, just the basic human rights that we are provided in our Constitution to have the good representation we deserve. So the right to representation. The 1963 case, Gideon versus Wainwright, established the right to counsel, and it gave defendants who could not provide defense would be provided to them by the state. And then furthermore, the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution also gives the right to representation to its citizens. My problem statement is that there is inadequate legal representation in America. So before I get into it, I kind of wanted to define inadequate and kind of what that means so you can get a better understanding. So there's not one situation that kind of encompasses inadequate. It's kind of like situational. There are multiple things that it refers to. So the first would be failure to investigate potential witnesses and evidence. This kind of ties into the next one of not providing viable defense. So if they're not investigating those witnesses and evidence, their client could potentially be charged for a crime that they didn't do or given a greater sentence that they didn't deserve because their lawyer didn't take the time to provide the defense that they were supposed to. Another definition of inadequate would be your conflict of interest cases or just lack of communication with the client. So just not telling the client like what they're doing and what's going on. This kind of ties into lack of time with the client. If they're not spending that time with the client, not building that relationship, they can't really build that time with that client. And then incompetence in legal arguments and court proceedings. A lawyer who doesn't understand things and doesn't know what they're doing can't possibly provide that representation that is needed for a defender to get the best defense possible. So a little bit of background. A 2022 survey done by the Legal Services Corporation found that there is no or not enough help for 92% of substantial civil legal problems, specifically for the low-income individuals in America. And the Oregon Public Defense System did a report in 2022 that discovered in just the state of Oregon, they would need an additional 1,296 full-time attorneys to maintain that standard, what is considered adequate to provide that basic human right of representation. And then Opel and Patel in 2019 did interviews of public defenders, and it was found that on average, a majority of them had 194 cases all at one time for a single attorney. So because of this large caseload, they only have enough time for 1 to 5 minutes with each client, which is kind of just enough time to quickly in court, like go over to them in their ear and like whisper what's going on and what's gonna happen. So some of the consequences of inadequate legal representation. One of the major ones is going to be loss of freedom. The Innocence Project found that in 90% of the cases that they used DNA evidence to exonerate somebody, inadequate representation was found to be a factor. Financial ruin. So a person who is found to put in prison for a longer time than it would have been if they had that good representation is now they're making that money that they need to sustain themselves or sustain the family, which kind of brings that impact on the family or any dependents that they are responsible for. Stigma and discrimination. So a lot of low-income individuals are commonly your African American, Indigenous people, women, and LGBTQ+ members. So since they're more likely to be those low-income individuals, they're more likely to need that defense, which is more likely to be inadequate. So there's a stigma and discrimination that kind of goes along with it. And then lastly, in severe cases, death penalty. There are cases where innocent people are pleading guilty to the death penalty and put on death row because they don't have adequate representation to defend them in court. So my first potential solution would be justice partners. So these are kind of your community-based organizations that are affected by the criminal justice system, like the social workers and nonprofits. So these people would act as a legal aid in kind of just helping along people in the criminal justice process and providing them like assistance in any cases needed, or if they need questions or somebody to go to talk to, they can kind of guide them along the process. The problems with this would be your training. So these organizations that are affected, not all of them have that understanding of the legal system and arguments, so they would need training done to them, which would require funding and time, and not only time to train them, but it's taking the time away from those organizations from doing the work that they're already doing. So my next potential solution is improved access. So this would require increased funds from either your federal or state government or any nonprofits. And this would allow like just hiring more public defenders and sponsoring those scholarships. But more access includes like a development of a free app or website that anyone can go to as like a legal aid platform. I know like right now a lot of mental health areas do this right now as kind of thing that 24/7 anyone can go to at any time, and it's completely free, and just go and ask questions and provide that help and kind of like a guideline, so people have that knowledge and education and understanding of what's going on in the CJ system. The problem is this is going to be those obtaining those funds to set up that system or hire those attorneys. And then what about those like poor communities? Not all communities have that access to like the internet or computer system that they're going to be able to get to this app or website. So what happens if we do nothing? If we do nothing, it's a continued injustice and discrimination against the poor. And you'll just see a continuance of that inadequate legal representation and those consequences that I went over earlier. So my fourth potential solution, and what I believe is the best solution, is setting equal requirements. So each state actually has different financial standards for what they see as a low-income individual in need of that representation that's provided to them by the state. And just because you have appointed counsel, it does not mean it's free counsel. A lot of times there is fees involved with that. So just because they are poor enough to qualify for that representation doesn't mean it's saving them any money, because there are still fees that are involved. So by providing like a mixed funding system where you have both state and local governments providing that funding will balance it out, because each state actually contributes different funding. And as you can see, actually 54% of states actually just do completely just state-funded legal representation. So moving to mixed funding would actually save money for the nation for majority of the states, and it wouldn't affect even like 22% of them that are already doing this. And then establishing that a statewide commission. So this is not done in every state, but it's done a few. But establishing a statewide commission nationally is kind of like a board that oversees any inadequate cases and helps remedy the situation so that defendant gets the remedies that they need. So not only will this help save money in majority of states, it'll give them more ability to use that funding elsewhere and help provide with a more easier way to obtaining that legal representation. So in conclusion, I believe that we should be providing equal nationwide requirements for providing counsel, having those nationwide financial standards, and a nationwide statewide commission to oversee those inadequate defense cases, and use that mixed funding of state and local government to save money and provide lawyers for more people. And those are my references.
After this presentation will be Mr. Frazier's, and then we're going to take a short break.
So I'm Megan Mellum. My topic is recidivism of adult property crime offenders. So my problem statement is that recidivism rates among property crime offenders is too high. And then recidivism is just when someone is released from jail or prison and then when they get out, they kind of revert back into engaging in criminal behavior. So kind of like an introduction or a background kind of. So my first study that I ever read on this, it found that the United States has a recidivism rate of from about 35 to 70%, ranging 1 to 5 years after an offender's release. And so obviously just looking at that, it seems really big, and it is. But this study also kind of compared European countries like Denmark and Norway, who focus a lot on rehabilitation instead of like punitive things for punishment. And they have a way lower recidivism rate than we do. It's about 20%. It does very little through the 1 to 5 year period, but obviously that's a lot lower than ours is. And so specifically for property crime, they do have the highest reoffense rate of all types of crime, which is about 80%. That is way more than violent crime, public order crime, and drug crime, and those all kind of range anywhere from 60 to 70%. And then in addition, property crime offenders are the most re-released type of offender per year. And then last but not least, the United States does spend one of the highest amounts, if not the highest amount, on prisons per year, and most of that funding is geared towards reoffenders and not first-time offenders. So my situation itself, it kind of starts from when I was younger, because I would know that people would go to jail and stuff, and just in my head I'd be like, okay, so they're going to jail and maybe they're getting help, or it'll make them so they can't commit crime anymore. And as I kind of got older, I knew people that would just kind of just go to jail a lot of times for like the same things. So like obviously that's not what was happening. And then in addition, I want to go to law school, and if I do practice criminal defense, I'd much rather my clients get something from being in jail rather than just being in the system of offending, getting arrested, going to jail, being released, and reoffending. So I guess in short, I'd rather just put myself out of a job than have people reoffending. So for my literature review and discussion, so from everything I've read, just focusing on rehabilitation in general has way better recidivism outcomes. So one of the things that really stuck out to me, I did read a study about a program in Texas, which it kind of trained inmates to be business entrepreneurs, and it kind of had them build like a business plan and then had actual business people review it. And that Texas prison had a super high recidivism rate, about 70%, but within that program, their recidivism rate was only about 6 or 7%, so that went way down. And then specifically for property crimes, there isn't very much out there on property crime specifically. There's always kind of like an extra factor in it. Like one of the mainstays I found, it was about property crime offenders going to diversion programs, but they had previously been drug offenders. And that study kind of happened in 2 counties in Oregon, and it kind of worked in one county and not really at all in the other one. And this study did note that though in the county that it did work, they usually have like less access to things like diversion, but in the one that it didn't work, they usually had like diversion, other things rather than going to jail. So my first potential solution is to make current programs more widespread. So I've noticed a lot, like through all my reading, that most of the really good programs are just in the federal system, or they're kind of sporadic throughout states. One of the main ones that I saw on the Bureau of Prisons has a list of a lot of things they do to kind of help rehabilitate inmates while they're inside. So first of all, they just do like a needs assessment. They're like, okay, what is this person's level of education? Do they have any mental health issues? Do they have any like substance abuse issues? Things like that. And they just kind of like make a path for them to follow to hopefully like make them the least likely to recidivate once they get out. And that just kind of follows them throughout, and it is as hard and as long as they determine it needs to be. So just kind of spreading like programs like that around more, it would just like increase the amount of people who could participate in the programs and hopefully benefit from them, which would hopefully lower recidivism. So my second potential solution is to kind of focus on financial literacy. So the study that found that property crime offenders had an 80% recidivism rate, it broke it down into what crimes have like the highest percentage of recidivism. And like larceny and burglary and forgery and fraud were right at the top with about like 30%, I think. So they made up the like vast majority of the percentage. So right when I see like fraud and like burglary and things, I always think of like credit card fraud and like check fraud and like stealing from people's houses. So that kind of brought into my mind, like, why are these people committing this? Are they committing it to buy drugs or just because they want it, or are they like doing these things to maybe like feed or clothe their family, things like that. And so I think just having kind of like a general like financial literacy course could be helpful, especially if they might struggle with those types of things. I know like just in schools, our financial literacy like education is not very good. And in addition, I think that something like that could help transition offenders from jail or prison to like the outside world. So I know when you are in jail or prison, you don't really have that much access to money, just what people give you or you give yourself, and you can't really just buy whatever you want. Whereas when you get out, you have hopefully a lot more access to money and you can buy literally whatever you want. And so my third potential solution is to have incentives for participating in rehabilitation programs. So my first thought with this is, I know that some places do it. One of the main ones I was finding was New Mexico does it. So my first thought was that it might encourage unwilling offenders to participate in the programs. Like if they see, oh, I get like more phone time or more tablet time, or I get a day of my sentence, things like that, maybe like, oh, I'll do it just for that, and hopefully they still get something positive out of it. And then in addition, I think it'd be important to allow offenders to choose to participate, because I know even like out here, we don't like being told what to do. So hopefully if they got to like choose to do it and not be forced to do it, it would make the program seem more positive, and inmates would view the program as positive, which would make them want to complete it. So my fourth potential solution is do nothing. So I feel like all this stuff is already kind of happening, but prison overcrowding would stay the same or get worse, and we would potentially be spending way more money than needed. Like I kind of said before, like most of our prison funding is used for reoffenders and not first-time offenders. So hopefully we'll be saving money in that way. So my pros and cons. So my first pro is that hopefully focusing on rehabilitation will hopefully cost less than incarceration eventually by lowering recidivism. Just like I kind of said like right before, we just spend a lot of our money on reoffenders and not first-time offenders. And my second pro is that it can reduce prison overcrowding since less people would be coming in and out. And one of my cons is that, just like with anything, all of the solutions will probably cost some sort of money unless there is just money laying around somewhere. And my second con, it's kind of like people might not be supportive of rehabilitation. Just because I know a lot of people that I know, they're always like, you shouldn't get free college for going to prison or cheaper college because people who don't do anything wrong, they have to pay thousands of dollars to go to college. Or like it's like prison is supposed to be a good time, like you made your bed, sleep in it kind of thing. So I think it might be kind of hard to convince people that that is a better option rather than just putting someone in jail or prison. So my best solution is solution number 3, which I guess is essentially bribery. Just I think it'll work the best just because hopefully people who usually wouldn't do it would just do it just solely for the reward. And then just allowing them to choose to do it will hopefully make them view the program as positive. So my recommendations for future research, so I already kind of mentioned like all of these throughout, but my first one was to focus on property crimes in general and like not include other factors in it, which with the study I mentioned, which was with like previous drug offenders, I don't doubt that a lot of property crime offenders have been drug offenders or are drug crime offenders, but I think there definitely is some that aren't. My second one was, why are individuals committing property crime? Just like, are they doing it because they like have to, or are they just doing it because they want to? And then my third one, are some offenders more predisposed to reoffending than others? Because I just kind of think that I know some people will like go to jail or whatever one time and then they'll be like, okay, I'm not going back. But then other times, other people will go like 5 or 10 times for the same thing and still just keep going back. So that is all I have in there, my references. If anyone has any questions.
This will be our last presentation before the break. on it, little screen icon.
I'm Justin Frazier, and today my presentation is on officer-involved domestic violence. Problem statement, intimate partner violence is more prevalent in law enforcement officers' homes compared to the general public. 24 to 40% of officers' families examined experience domestic violence, which is 2 to 4% more than the general public. Situation itself, first-hand childhood experience impacted my beliefs on law enforcement. Growing up, my first best friend in my childhood was, his father was a law enforcement officer. And he was a great guy. He did everything for the community. Everyone in the community knew who he was. You kind of knew him. You considered it kind of cool, I guess. You would say, but as kids, you know, you kind of get closer to each other's families. Go over, stay the night, hang out, ride bikes, do all of that. And as time went on, I just kind of saw him do some not so good things. And given the opportunity in this class to do some research, I thought this topic was a good one to cover. Also, with that, it impacted my beliefs. For a while, I used to think that all law enforcement officers were the same, but life brings maturity. As you grow up, kind of realize that people are who they are, and it's not who everyone is as a whole. For my literature review, Barron 2018 talks about a study being conducted of 1,104 sworn police officers. Out of the 1,104 sworn officers, 9% of them admitted to engaging in domestic violence acts at home. Just 9%, that's just under 100. But with the mandatory arrest policy, it talks about probable cause to domestic violence, which means if you have probable cause that domestic violence occurred, you can make an arrest. That article goes to mention no arrest being made of those officers agreeing. Prip and Peacock 2019 talked about the blue wall of silence, later to be known as the code of silence. That article mentioned departments having some type of silent code being a thing, which basically means that any reports of excessive force, misconduct, or crime being reported into the department, they're just not going to say anything. Which makes that 9% kind of questionable because we don't know the percentage of officers that just didn't say anything. And then Shema 2016 mentions why officer involved in domestic violence is an underreported thing. Also mentions why spouses oftentimes remain in a relationship. That article basically just mentions the basics as to why people stay in domestic violence relationships, whether that be financial reasons, children, or fear. And then God Mark 2015 talked about the differences in officers arriving at suspects' house as officers or as co-workers. That article talked about officers arriving at potential officers' houses that problems are occurring at as friends and not as co-workers. I think once we get to work and clock in, we should be working. Everyone's a suspect. We shouldn't treat people different just because we know them. In this sense, and then according to Skiller and Sidrowski, 50% of women who are killed in domestic violence relationships are killed with a firearm, while stating the presence of a firearm in a violent relationship raises the women's likelihood of homicide by 500%. And then according to the Lattenberg Amendment, anyone convicted of domestic violence cannot possess a firearm, but the article earlier mentioned the 9% agreeing, knowing the article mentioned no arrest. So if we have laws put in place that say we're not allowed to possess a firearm if we've been convicted of domestic violence, but if there's no convictions, how do we get around that? In a sense, Bellin and Crosden state that on-the-job stress, training and coding skills are reasons as to why officers start to engage in domestic violence. Most of us know that the job of a law enforcement officer is tough, but I think to better make sure that we aren't doing things at home that aren't okay, we should better see about help. Maybe we should make sure that we're getting the help that we need before we come into this career path. My first solution would be creating an anti-OIDB agency, and this agency will cater specifically to families that are experiencing officer-involved domestic violence. The problem with this is funding, but I mean, if we could find funding for a whole bunch of other things that aren't really a problem, I think we could find funding to start this up. My second solution is creating a stronger deterrent. 28% of Florida officers accused of domestic violence remain employed, whereas 1% of Florida officers with drug test complaints remain employed. I'm not advocating for anybody doing drugs, but these things, drugs and abuse, are two things we shouldn't put on hold. So I kind of think those numbers should be a lot closer together. After the second time being involved and brought up, you will be terminated. If relieved of duty, you may not be eligible for employment elsewhere until you can prove that you have been, that you have went to go seek help. My third solution would be preventative training, psychological examination to identify violent or abusive tendencies throughout background checks and the hiring process. I think we should. There's a thorough job being done throughout the process from what I've learned. But I think just taking a little more time to make sure that we're actually examining these guys to make sure that they're not going to eventually deter off into doing things that aren't supposed to be happening. My fourth solution, do nothing. If we do nothing, it continues to go unnoticed. Numbers continue to be skewed left, and a lot of the research, it talked about research being conducted so long ago. I found some recent articles, but a lot of the articles did piggyback off of research being so outdated that there aren't any true accurate numbers. Lives continue to be in danger if we continue to do nothing. Top solution, more psychological examination is my top solution. I think we should really sit down and kind of have countless conversations and put our guys through, not our guys, but the guys that want to do that, through countless scenarios to make sure that they're able to handle the stress that comes with being a law enforcement official. Who is impacted? Families, communities, police department. I think all of those kind of take an impact. I think communities especially, because we're as communities, a lot of our communities look up to our law enforcement. So if people in our community know that there's potential officers that aren't doing right, I think it kind of puts a negative perception on the department, and people do talk. So word gets around. And recommendation for future research. I think this is a great topic. Like I said, not much research has been done on it, but something that I do want to see, I would want to see in future research is a correlation between male and female officers. That basically, I want to see what officers are engaging in domestic violence more at home, whether it be male or female. And then a correlation between departments that just do not report it. If there could be like some studies going on about departments not reporting it. Conclusion, officer involved domestic violence is a thing. There are a few things we can do to help eliminate the problem. As to my 3 solutions, or 4, including the do nothing solution. And
All right, we'll give folks a chance to stretch your legs. We'll take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll get started with the last development at the top of the hour. Is that the best feeling?
Yeah, I was nervous as well while even reviewing over this, and I was like, I'm going to probably stutter.
I literally every day. But when I do presentations like this, I was nervous in Chicago, I was nervous in DC last year. I presented last year for research day here at Mount Marty. I was nervous. I think it's fairly natural. And I checked section, she prefaces, hey, this is a little bit dark, a little more mud.
Well, it kind of is because I didn't want to be like, boom, just right there in your face. I wanted to be like, it was a warning, like, hey, this is going to be a dark, morbid topic.
What is this? No, how did that go? Sorry. I did that.
Thanks for coming out. Absolutely, showing some love. I like the variety. I think sometimes it's really dangerous. That's usually kind of just a little bit.
Yeah, I figured.
That there was a shelf like I did not know. And then it kind of shocked me because they were like, well, they have 11 executions in Oklahoma. And then they used 8 of those with the expired drugs, and then they had to stop. Because they were not working effectively. I don't know if it's expired.
Yeah, I should have heard that. I was not ready for those.
This works. I was literally looking at it, I'm like, I'm hoping I'm pressing the right button. Double check the button. Oh yeah, you're sick and like you grab my doctor's. Always do it. That's funny.
They got those off the shelf. I think she goes there. But they are.
Stuff for us.
Jail isn't always the answer. Let's say if you're a hammer, every solution is a hammer. If you're a nail,
What makes sense?
all right, looks like most folks have returned, so I will give the floor up to our next presenter, who happens to be the president of the Criminal Justice Honor Society.
Hi, my name is Tiana Babakakil, and I'm doing my presentation today on community involvement with police departments. So just a little agenda of what we're going to go through. I'll take my problem statement, and then I'm doing an emphasis on the Ferguson effect, so I'll explain what Ferguson is, and then the situation itself, why I think this is important, and then my solutions. So the lack of community support negatively affects police officers. So what I mean by lack of support, I'm talking about things like appreciation for law enforcement, faith in law enforcement, protesting, riots, social media, so kind of a bunch of good things and negative things. Also legislation, so like defunding police, how that stems from community, as well as changes in policing, so willingness to engage with the community, how police officers interact with the people that they work with, as well as career burnout, altering training and providing resources, as well as decline in officer mental health, and decrease in applications, as my counterpart said, is we have very low retention for policing. Why is it important? Because it affects all of us. It's not just community, the offenders and police officers, but it's affecting the criminal justice system, so people who are entering and exiting the criminal justice system, as well as police officers, like I said, about mental health, career burnout, and then it also greatly affects the community. So if the community is happy with their faith, happy with their law enforcement, they're better to have the positive interactions with them and the negative interactions. And that also involves offenders and victims, so it's not just people who are entering the criminal justice system as an offender. So what happened in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014 was a dispatch call went out to a robbery in progress. And when a dispatch call goes out, they can give you a description of the person who is potentially offending. So the convenience store that was robbed was in Ferguson, Missouri. And the officer that was dispatched was Officer Darren Wilson. And the potential offender was Michael Brown. So Officer Wilson pulls up to the convenience store and he sees the description of this 18-year-old black male who meets the description of the potential robbery. He goes to confront the individual in his car, where he then, Michael Brown attacks Officer Wilson through his car, so he tries to reach for his less lethal, which is your stun gun or taser, but he couldn't reach it considering the altercation, so he reached for his gun. He pulled his firearm out and discharged it once, getting Michael Brown in the hand. Michael Brown fled, and Officer Wilson chased him down. Michael Brown turned. Officer Wilson shot him twice in the arm. So after this crime, it was investigated by the Department of Criminal Justice. And in Ferguson, Missouri, there was plenty of riots, protests, and looting, similar to what we saw in 2020 with George Floyd. There was attacks on police officers and attacks on precincts for the law enforcement in Ferguson, Missouri. And so after Officer Wilson was not indicted, meaning he did get charged for the murder of Michael Brown, riots and looting and protests grew significantly. So the president at the time, President Nixon, sent out the National Guard to Ferguson, Missouri, where it was then de-escalated. After that, we were to see a quote-unquote Ferguson effect. So we saw support from the community diminish for law enforcement officers, as well as more protests with policing, and tensions grew between community and their law enforcement, similar to what we saw in 2020. Situation to self, so I'm gonna start the Academy for Sioux Falls Police Department in June, and I wanted to prepare myself for what I'm going into, as well as I also am a big advocate for mental health. And if I wasn't gonna be a police officer, I'd want to be a counselor, and so mental health is also very important to me. And I wanted to bring light to what officers also go through. It's not an easy job, and I've also done prior research involving mental health with policing. And I've heard some really harsh stories that don't get put out there because a lot of the time you see a lot of bad stories. So my 3 potential solutions are community outreach advocate programs, as well as community resource officers, and then community policing. So for community policing, it is defined for a certain type of policing practices. So the 4 things that kind of encompass community policing is community partnerships, so involving your community with other agencies and social media, as well as organizational transformation. So inside your police department, you're building more positive structure and something that works more fluidly, as well as problem solving and proactively addressing issues instead of reactively addressing issues. A research study done on community-oriented policing to reduce crime has shown that there's a lot of positive effects of community policing, but it also doesn't have any sort of effect to crime and the community's fear of crime. So yes, that there is a positive that the community is bonding positively with their law enforcement counterparts, but you're not seeing any change in crime itself. And then community resource officer, so like I said, I'm going to start the Academy for Sioux Falls, and so I took their definition of community resource officers, and it's to help resolve community-oriented policing, so their actual personal, or it's an actual position, so a certain officer is addressing the issues that they have noticed in community policing, as community policing is becoming a more popular practice. And these also help make connections with the community more positive. And so you can see things like Coffee with the Cops, is in Peace Academies, and Fishing with Cops, so kind of to help bridge that gap to help you know that officers are people too, and they want to be positive to all the community. But the lack of this one is more just a band-aid for community policing, as well as you're only affecting the more positive side of community. So they involve more like YMCA and Boys and Girls Club, things that you won't always see potential offenders to get into. And the one that I think would be the best is community outreach and advocate teams. So these help condition officers to help better the issues that they are going through. So they promote positive interactions, trust, they reduce crime rates, and they also protect police officers. So it's training that the extra officers go through, so it's an actual team that's put together, and they get extra training to help better their interactions with their community, as well as promote better training for addressing offenders and crimes. And then they also help get to know the community, social agencies, and service providers. So more than just your community, you're also working with multiple agencies as well, which kind of loops back to community policing. Programs that are practiced with the advocate teams is educating youth, substance abuse resources, understanding awareness, and culture diversity. And then one that actually Sioux Falls Police Department has are interpreters. So they have 10 to 15 different interpreters for different languages that help the law enforcement. They're on call 24/7, so they help law enforcement bridge that gap of language between all the diverse community in Sioux Falls. So what happens if we do nothing? As we have said prior, there's going to be continuous high recidivism rates, as well as decline in officer wellness. Valuable resources are spent elsewhere. So more resources and money is being put towards like riot gear and that kind of training, when it could be put towards more like community involvement things, like I explained prior. And then it also just, like I said, faster career burnout and weak community ties and trust in their law enforcement. To kind of encompass what I said, the lack of support for the community towards their law enforcement officers at its lowest in 20 years, which is a very negative statistic, as well as since the Ferguson effect, we've seen a lot less support for law enforcement, and the resources for public safety that we're using, like I said, they're being put towards things that might not be necessities. You hear a lot of people saying, I want to see more training for our officers. I want our money to be put in good places. Well, in this case, we can put them in better places if we help stemming. We're seeing work being put towards us in the community as well as law enforcement officers. So it's kind of working together to help better our community. And it's also important because it's affecting everybody. Like I said at the beginning of my presentation, you have victim offenders and then you have your community. So, yeah. So my differences.
On the right, please.
Okay, my name is Liam Vitus. There's a lack of mental health resources for inmates. So situation itself, I recently accepted a job to work at HSC as a mental health associate. I'll be taking adolescents through the day-to-day and working with nurses and doctors. And then in high school, I was a sitter in the ICU unit in a hospital, which I basically sat there and talked with patients who were suicidal and needed constant watch. And so just being able to see and hear their stories was really eye-opening for me. And so I found an interest in this subject. Literature review. So Forrester, for most prisoners, the first time that they are introduced and able to receive help is when they arrive at prison. And then people with mental illness will stay in prison longer, even for the same offense as somebody who is healthy. And then Myers said 261 adults were assessed shortly after incarceration. Of that, 18.5% did not participate in any formal treatment. And so we're having these people come in, but they don't want the treatment or they're afraid to speak up. And so it can be very difficult to get them the help that they need. And then in this article, it said less than half those who graduate with a bachelor's degree in psychology go on to complete a graduate's degree. You'll see why that matters soon. And then many good things have happened, but reentry services and supports remain pretty disjointed as you experience. Reentry can be very tremendous amount based on where you are incarcerated and what community you're in. And so like a lot of programs don't work well together, like some work on jobs and then there's not one that encompasses everything. And so it can be difficult when they're jumping from one program to the next. And then in this last one, in terms of mental health risks, the vast majority of men in custody have experienced substantial childhood adversity, things like sexual abuse and trauma from their childhood. So it would be very difficult to talk to them about those situations. Some of the issues in prison that affect mental health, crowded living conditions, coming from the outside world, moving in, now you're living with all these people, a bunch of different personalities. It can be very difficult to come in there and be yourself. Lack of privacy. Now you're out in the open, you have to shower with everyone. So it can be very difficult to get used to that. And then increased rate of victimization. You've heard of a lot of sexual assaults happening in prison, and there's lots of violence when you get all these people together. And so it can be very strenuous on the mind. And then solitary confinement is a big one. When you're stuck, alone, it can be very difficult to get your head cleared. And then lack of connection with the outside world. This is just difficult for anyone. Even during COVID, we saw it. It was just hard for people to stay indoors and kind of be by themselves. And then not seeing family. Being on the inside and not being able to provide for your family, knowing on the outside that they're struggling and you're in there and you can't do anything about it, can be very difficult for a lot of inmates, and they take it harsh. Why are prisoners not getting treatment? Initial screenings miss mental health disorders. A lot of times they're just trying to get people through, and so they're very quick, and with the lack of mental health professionals, it can be very hard to catch these mental health disorders, and prisoners are scared to talk about mental health. I think a lot of people are in general, just because, especially males, they want to seem strong and tough, and so it can be very hard when they have to talk about something that makes them feel weak. And then Olson 2021 argues that prisoners' mental health services are poorly defined and not really regulated. In this article, he kind of talks about when he arrived to prison, it was very hard for him to find someone to talk to, and he just said he struggled with getting his emotions out there, and even when he got into being able to someone he could talk to, they kind of just pushed him aside because they had so many people. And then many prisoners are scared to speak up because of the stigma that surrounds it and being judged. The numbers, 26% of inmates were diagnosed with mental health prior to prison, but only 18% of them were taking medication upon arrival. And then 50% of those who had a mental health condition upon arrival did not receive pharmacotherapy while incarcerated, according to Sterling. Despite court mandates, mental health treatment is only for severe cases and really depends on where you're located. Facility and state based on the funding, so that's a big one. Solution 1. So my solution is to teach classes on how the brain works and mental illness. There's a thing called mindfulness-based stress reduction therapy. It was a Dutch study, private prisons were studied. Basically, they talked to them about what stressed them out, what kind of conditions, environment, things like that, and got what they thought of the program, so they were able to kind of figure that out. And then Robert Morgan discussed new teaching methods on behavior to avoid recidivism. And so basically, all these people are coming from different backgrounds, and they all have their own minds. So kind of figuring out what triggers and what you can do to change the way you think is going to be very important into not committing another crime. And then mindfulness is proven to help with anxiety, anger, emotional regulation, focus, memory, and pain. And then it makes sense to teach it to inmates, says Castellanos. My solution 2 would be create programs for our reintegrating prisoners to society. There's already existing programs, but a lot of them have qualifications and prerequisites that kind of eliminate a lot of prisoners. Mentally ill releases are significantly more likely than their counterparts to recidivate. So getting them that help right away is going to be very important to keeping them out of prison. Critical time intervention is one of them that I found. A very good program, but there's a lot of qualifications like you must speak English, and so that already eliminates a lot of people in America. And then many offer classes on jobs, education, but a lot of them will lack the mental health aspect of it and dealing with those emotions. So my solution 3 would be to hire more mental health professionals. A lot of jobs require, for mental health, they require like a doctorate or a master's. But I think that by allowing people with bachelor's degrees and associate's degrees just to get there and be able to talk with these inmates, we could pay them less and hopefully lower the recidivism rate as a whole. Just getting these people someone to talk to about their life stories will be able to help. And then this source says that prisons are more focused on security, which leaves an environment filled with mental health disorders that aren't getting treatment. This was an Italian prison actually, and basically the World Health Organization came out with a new policy, and they, by doing this, they wanted to secure more people, and instead of giving them treatment, they thought just to add more security. And so then you're ending up with all these people with disorders. Yeah, they're locked in these prisons, but they're also not getting the help that they need. And then my do nothing. So suicide is the leading cause of mortality in prisons worldwide. The Department of Health showed that 72% of male and 71% of female sentenced prisoners were found to suffer from 2 or mental health disorders. To me, these numbers are just too high. Obviously, they're never going to be 0, but I think by hopefully adding some solutions, we can hopefully lower these numbers by quite a bit and get these people the help that they need. my best solution to teach class on to prisoners on how the brain works. I believe it's the most cost effective. Learning the way your brain works can really help you understand your triggers and how you react to things in your environment, how you handle yourself. And then the study said that demonstrated that individuals with schizophrenia who received psychosocial treatment to improve their thinking skills had increased communication between the frontal and temporal brain areas, which was associated with enhanced emotional processing. So just after reading that, it was really important to me that by teaching these people how their brain works, they can hopefully allocate that into their life. And then the mindfulness-based stress reduction study, inmates were able to take over and meet up to talk. They were able to meet themselves eventually after someone stopped leading the group, and they were able to do that themselves. Problems with my solutions. Money is the main problem, like always, but I believe by initiating these solutions that it will lower the recidivism rate, which will hopefully lead to saving money in the future. The lack of mental health professionals, which can be solved by allowing people with bachelor's and associate's degrees to work these jobs. And then paying for additional training to teach mental health can be expensive, but I think that it will be worth it in lowering the recidivism rate as well. And then these were my references.
My name is Andrea Garcia, and I am doing my presentation on the effects of plea bargains. Starting off with a little bit of background, plea bargaining didn't start in the U.S. officially until 1970, when the Brady versus United States case had officially declared plea bargaining to be used as a resolution for criminal cases. As of now, 97% of U.S. federal convictions and 95% of state conviction cases are being resolved in plea deals. To me, this number is insanely high, but I don't think this number will ever drop. According to the ABA Standing Committee on Legal Aid and Indigent Defendants, there was a report conducted and released in 2017 on the state of Louisiana. The public defenders were assigned about 150,000 cases, and in the report they stated that in order for these cases to be evenly distributed among the public defenders and for them to be able to provide effective assistance of counsel, they would need to hire about 1,769 full-time employees or attorneys. But in 2017, they were only standing at about 363 attorneys or public defenders, which is not even a third of what they are needing. So it kind of shows that because of the low amount of public defenders that the state has, probably leads to an incentive to convince their clients to take the plea deal that the prosecutors offer. My problem statement is that too many cases are being resolved in plea bargaining. The reason for this is because it gives offenders a chance to reoffend once they are released from prison, which could potentially harm more victims as well as our society. Also because innocent people tend to plead guilty due to their belief that they will receive ineffective assistance of counsel if they were to go to trial. Another reason is because of prosecutorial discretion. Prosecutors may give harsh sentences or they're not harsh enough when it comes to offering the plea deals. And overcrowding, which is obviously the biggest problem in our criminal justice system. The situation to self, I come from two immigrant parents who came here and lived in, I've seen them growing up just live in the constant fear of law enforcement and just the fact that they will be treated unfairly. And because of this, I've kind of always just grown up to believe that we should all be treated equally and fair in the criminal justice system. And I just firmly believe in trusting the process and what it was intended to do. I also just want a safe community. Some of you may or may not know that I volunteer on the ambulance team back home. One of the scenarios that we got called to was for a 5.5-month-old infant who was unresponsive. When we got there, we noticed she had multiple bruises on her face and her body, facial and head wounds, and we were able to resuscitate her, but unfortunately she passed away 4 days later up at the hospital in Sioux Falls. After the police investigation, they had revealed that her father had suffocated her that day that we got called out, and that he had also slammed her face onto the floor and was just abusing her. And this kind of tore my community apart because the prosecutor had offered him a 5 years plea deal to be served in prison. So he will be out this time next year. And because of this, I just want to provide a safe future for any and all kids. And in the future, I want to be an attorney just to provide a sense of safety for myself, my family, and others. And I just want to bring justice to those that need it. One of my potential solutions is to lower trial costs. One way that we can do this is to assign court costs based on income. This would ensure that everyone's Sixth Amendment rights are being met, which is the right to a speedy and public trial, as well as to legal representation. Another option is to offer community service to help lower court costs. The Supreme Court in Ohio actually offers this for felony offenses. They offer a maximum of 500 hours, being paid minimum wage, as well as for misdemeanors, they offer a maximum of 30 hours. Another potential solution is to create funding for public defenders. The reason for this is to obviously hire more and hope that they can do their job more effectively. The underfunding, as well as the high case loads that are happening right now, is tied to how well they can do their job. The funding structure right now for the public defenders kind of creates that incentive to persuade their clients to take those plea deals that are being offered to them. And we can do this by allocating more state and local funds to them, and also devote resources to public defenders. And one way we can do this is just to make more federal grants available to them. In the future, I kind of would like to create some sort of program that would allow other attorneys to get some sort of like bonus or a reward for helping take off some of those caseloads from the public defenders. This next solution is a bit extreme, but why not just abolish plea bargaining in general? Right now, it's kind of seen as tough on crime because it allows criminals to avoid getting the full consequences of their crime. As well as it harms society. The victims of crime don't really get the justice that they deserve, and society believes that criminals don't really get a punishment. If we do nothing, we'll continue to see overcrowding, but that will always be a problem. We will continue to see dangerous offenders on the streets once they get out and they can potentially reoffend. We'll continue to see innocent people in prison simply because they don't believe that they're gonna get the counsel that they need. And society will continue to believe that criminals get no punishment. This next solution is the one that I think is the best. What if we make all punishment equal? We can do this to avoid any prejudice against anyone of a different gender, race, or religion. We can do this by setting mandatory minimum sentences for felony cases. If multiple people commit the same crime, we can bump up the minimum sentence and hope that it'll work as a deterrence. Congress had imposed mandatory minimum sentences for narcotic offenses and gun offenses. So basically anyone convicted of a violent crime or a gun offense, if they had 5 years, they would get 5 years for just having a firearm on them. If they discharged that firearm, they would get 10 years, and if it was their second conviction, they would get 25 years. So in conclusion, too many cases are being resolved in plea bargains, and this could potentially become a bigger problem in the future. And I believe that the best solution for this is to set mandatory minimum sentences to ensure that everyone is being treated equally. And these are my references.
I was going to ask Jade if she could help me with that.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jonathan Carlstead. My presentation is on Is Bail Fair? My problem statement is that bail is unequitable to all citizens. Under the 8th Amendment, we are all protected from excessive bail. Now, if you want to look at excessive in its own term, excessive from somebody on this side of the room could be different from somebody on this side of the room, or whatever financial standing you're in, excessive could mean a whole different thing. My situation itself, I kind of went in, look at the effects outside of people's control rather than, I don't really know anyone that's in that situation, but kind of want to talk about a friend I've had since first grade, and as my classmates and teammates make fun of me, first grade for me was a long time ago. So I've known this guy for a little while. I see it firsthand what life can do. We worked in high school, we worked on a farm. He's one of the hardest working kids I know. After high school, I joined the military. He went the blue collar route. Well, first job he had, they went bankrupt, he got laid off, so he was in between jobs for a while. Picked up another job, they got outbid on a job site, so they then moved. He couldn't go with them because he has a kid, so on and so forth. So just looking at how life can be unfair sometimes and having a little empathy for people in this situation is kind of what drew me to this topic. The effects on inability to post bail. Legal representation must take additional steps to meet with clients. As my classmate talked about, legal counsel sometimes has to go through extra steps in that little bit of time that they're allowed. If they have to check into a jail now to go meet with their client, that 6 to 8 minutes she talked about is completely wasted just trying to get into jail. So like she said, they get hardly any time to meet with their clients. It's not really fair for somebody who has to sit in jail compared to somebody who posts their bail and they get to meet with their lawyer whenever they want. Persons who cannot post bail are more likely to take plea bargains or get longer sentences. I forgot the statistic off the top of my head, but just getting into that jail setting and kind of, I don't think anybody in here wants to go to jail, but sitting in it has a little bit of effect on your mentality, and you could just take whatever's given to you right off the bat, and maybe it's not the best sentence for you. Maybe you're innocent, but you take the punishment just so you can get out of the jail setting. And then 50% of suicides happen within the first 7 days of incarceration. Obviously that's, takes 7 days for people to lose their mind. I think any of us would be in the same situation. We don't like to be in jail. Obviously suicide probably isn't the best option, but it is a big statistic. Here's a little bit of my literature review. A quote I liked from this one was, if applicable, and the offender's past history regarding crime into account in order to make decisions such as a decision to grant bail. This, they use the term flight risk in this one specifically, and a lot of the research I found for that one, but flight risk obviously doesn't mean that they just can't get on a plane. It's as if they wanted to not post bail. They look at a person's background. Have they had prior convictions? Are they likely to actually show up to court if they're given a court date? They kind of take in that effect to see if they don't want to give them bail, will they come back to court or will they just go out and reoffend? Another one, between 1970 and 2011, the pretrial jail population increased by 433%, primarily due to judges relying more and more on cash bail and setting it at amounts people could not afford. Obviously, like I said, the amounts that people cannot afford can vary from person to person, but a good example I'd like to use for this one is if you have two people that commit the same exact crime, every variable about their lives and everything about the crime is the exact same except for their financial standing. Person one can post bail, get out, and handle their business from there. Person number two cannot, and they have to sit in jail and await their trial. Another one, this is probably one of my favorite articles that I found, but Strager and Bullock used bail discriminates against the poor as their overarching theme for their work. And I thought the term discriminates getting put in with bail was a very strong argument, because I think within the last 5, 10, 15 years, we've seen the bigger news articles and bigger issues coming up regarding discrimination as being like a big deal. So seeing it used in the topic that I was using kind of opened my eyes to it a little bit, because I mean, if you think about it, discrimination against anybody is frowned upon, right? So really bail's discriminating against the poor was like one of the big things that opened my eyes to it. And then people in jails have 4 to 6 times higher prevalence of mental illness than the general population. Obviously, put this up here before Liam had his whole idea, so I don't want to segue too much into that and take over his topic. And then here are my alternatives to bail. First, I want to look at zero bail initiative, bail amounts based on income, and then risk assessments. This is more touching on how I was talking about with the judges. So the first one for the zero bail initiative, this eliminates cash bail for all but class 1 felonies. So this would be your most severe crimes. And then I want to go in misdemeanors account for 80% of all crimes committed. So if you look at how many, the percentage of misdemeanors these people are going to jail, if we could get rid of those pretrial confinement for 80%, that's a lot that's going to take away from overcrowding in our jail system. And then as for the class 1 felonies, that would obviously, I don't think we want to let people back into the community if they've committed those higher level crimes. Income-based amounts. This one was kind of hard to find research on, but my idea was to base bail off of percent of income. So if someone gets mixed up in some criminal activity and their bail is going to be set, you can go off a percent of their income. Let's say for robbery, this community set robbery, you will pay 11% of your income is going to be your bail amount. So they just pull your records. Obviously, it's April, everyone's been doing their taxes, so we can all send it in to get taxes. I think we all can, send it in to be able to get accurate bail amounts. And then you set your bail at that amount. And then a big issue that came up with trying to argue a percent of income is, what if the person hasn't had a job? What if it's someone in between jobs or someone, a homeless person that commits a crime? Then obviously we're gonna have a problem with finding how much they made. One of the big things would be to go off the median income of an area. So let's say Yankton community, median household income, $61,000 a year. You could base it off that and set that, like I said, 11% off of that is what that person has to pay for their bail amount. But this could be still a little bit of a subject to be argued, because of what if a person is underneath that median, so they still have to meet what everyone else, the higher amounts, have to pay. It could still be a little unfair in that sense. My third, and what I think is the best solution, would be risk assessments. This is kind of more leaning on the putting more into the judge's hands of what they have to handle. Upon doing research on what it takes to become a judge, it takes a lot of school, a lot of tests. They go through they have to be really, really smart. There's so much stuff they have to memorize. So in my head, if they're really good at what they're doing, then throwing a little bit on their plate really isn't a bad thing. So then going through all these, giving the judge more power to grant that bail. Things they consider would be ability or inability to help the community. So like I was saying earlier, the term flight risk got thrown around a lot. Obviously, like I said, doesn't regard to getting on a plane, but will this person go out in the community between when they got accused of this crime and their trial date? Will they be able to contribute to the community? Like any one of our professors, if they got mixed up, they contribute to our learning. So the judge could look at that and be like, well, if he is in jail, then he can't help these students learn. The school is going to be at a lesser advantage for the professor. We could grant him no bail because we want him to go continue to contribute to the community. First-time offenses, you could look into, like, just say it's a father that got mixed up in something. He's just trying to help his family. If he's the breadwinner to his wife and 3 kids, what if we take him and throw him in jail? Now his wife and 3 kids are gonna have to struggle to figure out how to go through life in that month or so time frame, maybe 2-month time frame that from when he got in trouble to his jail date. And then, like I was talking about the flight risk, kind of got to it a little fast, but just to see if that person will show up to their court date, or if they'll just skip town and move to Oregon or whatever, try to hide out and not go to their court date. And then likelihood of committing more offenses. This goes to, it's a repeat offender, high recidivism, and you see, he has 3 times where he's committed the same crime within a time frame, doesn't appear, kind of plays in good with the flight risk. Probably won't grant them that bail because they're not going to come back to their court date. And then my 4th solution is, what if we do nothing? Suicide rates in jails will continue to be an issue. I'm a big advocate for suicide awareness. I've lost a lot of friends in the military to suicide. I don't think it's the best option. I've seen what it does to their families firsthand. And obviously, that statistic within the first 7 days, like that's a big number. Family structures will continue to be affected negatively. Obviously, like I said, you take that father figure out of those kids' lives, they're affected in a different way. Individuals can be sentenced longer than average. Obviously, you want to get out of jail if you don't like that setting. You don't go to the suicide route, but you want to get out. You're just going to tell your lawyer, hey, give me whatever I can. I don't want to be in here any longer. And you can take a sentence that's not appropriate for your crime. And then labeling theory, we talked about it in the criminal justice field. Labeling theory is just saying, once you go to jail, it's like, hey, you are a criminal. So then after that, they're like, okay, so I'm a criminal. It leads to higher recidivism rates, and then they'll just get out, and then they'll go reoffend. My recommendations for you to research, more research done on the income-based alternatives. Like I was saying, I kind of made up the 11% as a percentage just to kind of give an example, but I couldn't find where a percentage would work in any situation, or if there are percentages of income-based for crimes. And then with more pretrial release, how would that affect bail bonds? Obviously, we know bail bonds works when they are posting bail, they handle the bail amounts. What if we build another thing that helps keep track of people who are out but they don't have money involved? You can do some other way of keeping track of them. That way they make sure they show up to their trial dates. And these are my references. Thank you.
This will be our final presentation for the day.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. To conclude our presentations today, I'll be presenting in juvenile recidivism and rehabilitation. The problem statement in America, juvenile recidivism rates are high. As my colleague has spoken earlier, most of them have been adults, which is 35 to 70%. The other 23% is made by juveniles. With that being said, the situation to solve, the reason why I chose this research topic is because I myself grew up with family members or seen my neighbors around the community either go in or out of jail, or within family members getting taken out of their home after being raided, or etc., which I would say for drug-related cases or etc. And at some point, I found myself in that situation where I became part of that statistic at a young age. And honestly, like my colleague mentioned, nobody likes being in jail. As I was sitting in there, I realized that being in that route further in the future would lead either me being part of a death statistic or being further into the system. And I was conducting the research to those who may not know what juvenile recidivism is. It refers to the reoffending of an individual or who has previously been in the justice system. As I was doing this research, I came across the adverse childhood experiences a study conducted by Alex Yoros, a systematic review, and a can't say the word, meta-analytical research that showed a correlation between recidivism and adverse childhood experiences. The study was conducted with juveniles that are in the system and were in the system. The study conducted was either between a range of 0 to 10, showing either a trauma of sexual abuse, drug abuse, or any kind of abuse that they've gone through and behind closed doors that nobody else sees. And it showed a high percentage of consistencies of people in and out of jail, either as adults, now future adults, or juveniles. And with that being said, we believe that the juvenile system, by using the deterrence theory, it will help reduce recidivism by punishing the juvenile, either putting them in confinement or putting them, as we speak, probation, supervised probation. 44% of juveniles that are released from state custody across 30 states are later on rearrested within a year. As doing that research, I came down with 4 potential solutions, one of them being the multi-systematic therapy that works with juveniles from the ages of 10 through 17. 34 states that use this approach have shown a significant percentage of recidivism rates diminish within their state. South Dakota is one of those states that does not use it. As I was doing this research, South Dakota, if they implement this this approach, it would help them reduce the reoffending that they guys currently have in the state. And it all begins by empowering, I guess, the family member or the adult, the parent. By empowering the parent with this, it helps the juvenile go out in their social circles, around their peers, around their school, and around their communities to create a chain link reaction towards reducing antisocial behavior and improve their functioning with the people that are around them. And to continue with it, I came across the cognitive behavior program known as CBT, which is a psychological approach. And this approach helps to identify the outcomes of the juvenile's decisions in a rational and irrational state. By using this, we understand that it's just a part of life being in and out of the system, the juvenile system. The reason why I chose this, it shows the ineffectiveness by approaching the psychological feature of why they're making the irrational or rational choices in what they want to do in life. The goal for this is to have the comprehension that there is a problem and where the problem begins, to not have that problem extend itself within the future. There was a study also that many of the juveniles that go into corrections, into a confinement, some of them are either using or not using or witness people use. I wanted to use substance abuse programs to have the juveniles sit down with people that are older than them, for them to hear the stories of others that have been in jail, in prison, or found themselves recuperating themselves from substance abuses. This will help the juvenile understand that the path that they're choosing in their life, they can make a change. This gives the juvenile a second chance to rehearse or review their life as they go into adulthood. The goal for this also will help create a chain reaction to those around them. If that creates a chain, we will have lower recidivism rates as they grow up, to not have many prisons having overcrowding in prisons, and also helps them have a voice, to have the deliberately to be heard by someone and not get judged. They might as well, on the other hand, they'll get positive advice from it to see themselves be a better person in the future. My first solution, if we do nothing, we'll have higher recidivism rates. As they grow up, they will be prone to do more criminal activity. The criminal mentality state will never leave them at that point, and they'll always be around it. Their social circles will not change. they might pick up habits throughout the future that they don't have now, but later on they might. And this avoids either a statistic in substance abuse, reoffending in the system, and avoids a death rate percentage as well. And I chose the MST. The reason why I chose it gives the juvenile a sense of comfort because it comes with a comprehensive approach, that they're being understood, that there's someone actually being there for them as the person that's being empowered, which would be the parent and the therapist with them. It will create a plan for the juvenile to proceed in life, to have a better understanding of what they want to do in life, and to not look at the criminal path that others have taken around them, or just to make something out of themselves in the future. They have no idea what they want to do in life. Recommendation for the future, as most of the juveniles that are coming out from confinement, some of them do not have any options or consider rehabilitation programs. For the reason is, as one of my colleagues mentioned, they are afraid to approach someone, especially at a young age. They feel like they're gonna be blamed for something or be put on like they're gonna be given a certain title that they might carry inside with them throughout their whole life. If they carry that throughout their whole life, there won't be any improvement. So with that being said, individualized treatment for rehabilitation programs to address juvenile offenders to identify mental health and substance abuse, and to provide educational needs if the juvenile doesn't consider going to school in the future. This will be a proper way to keep the juvenile within that limit. Trauma-informed care. The trauma-informed care approach is like an underlying trauma to promote healing, resilience, and positive coping strategies that will help each juvenile to speak up of certain things that they haven't spoken about that haunt them as they either commit crime or abuse any substance as they go in life. Monitoring as they come out of a confinement, it will help to post-release monitoring with support mechanisms to provide supervision to juveniles in transition back to the community. This will help the community view the juvenile in a different way. It won't prejudice them in the sense that whatever they've done or they're doing is something that they came out and will continue to do. It'll help them improve themselves as a person and to be a better adult in the future. For future research focus on developing and implementing a holistic approach that addresses the complex needs of a juvenile offender to promote a successful reintegration into society. If a study is conducted, if this is followed within time, we could get statistics to show improvement or disimprovement in each approach that's being conducted. And these are my references. Thank you very much.
For the audience, thank you very much for coming out and supporting your classmates and athletes and students. To the criminal justice seniors, I thank you for all the hard work you put in this semester to making this possible. I'm blown away at the quality of your research and the quality of your presentation, and I congratulate you for a job well done. The CJ students will make themselves available for the next few minutes if you want to come and ask them any questions or solicit autographs. But thank you again, and you guys have a great day.